What is up, sexy people? It is Dave, it is Duncan, back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. For this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Norwegian group Sibiir. The band's new album, Undergang, released on June 14th via Fysisk Format Records.
Nailed it.
Oslo-based Sibiir saw first light in 2014 and have been polishing their special brand of Norwegian metal ever since. The band's second album, Ropes, from 2019 was met with great critical acclaim and got nominated for a Spelleman Norwegian Grammy, basically, in the category of metal. On Undergang, Sibiir keeps things authentic, just capturing drums, bass, and guitars in a few layers to keep it as close to a live experience as possible. The band says, what inspires us is all the incredibly cool music that comes out of Norway's underground bands every day. It's hard to name drop any particular band, but the fact that others hear references and inspirations in their music is very
It's even harder to name check bands if you're Scottish because you can't pronounce any of the names. So.
The lyric universe explored in Undergang revolves around the political reality of today's world. The band elaborates the lyrics are about all the crap going on around the world, war and bloody genocide, a growing support for political and religious extremists, and increased tension between East and West reaching a dangerously high level. And on top of everything, we have the climate crisis. So yeah, not exactly good times.
When they put it like that, I mean...
The process of writing the material for Undergang has been characterised by the fact that vocalist Jimmy moved from the Norwegian capital Oslo to the west coast of Ålesund. This meant that he could not participate to the same extent as before when the songs were being jammed in the rehearsal room, and thus the vocals have not been part of the songs and the overall soundscape as early in the process as before. The band adds to compensate for Jimmy's absence, the instruments have probably, consciously or unconsciously, challenged themselves on a detailed level to a greater extent in order to maintain interest in the song. The result is an album topped with bold riffs and details, which we feel is our best yet. Recorded at Caliban Studios in Norway from September 23rd to October 1st in 2023 by Ruben Willem. Additional recording done at Front Row Studio and Bragavian Studio, then mixed and mastered by Ruben Willem. Okay, so Sibiir. So 9 tracks, almost 43 minutes in length. I was aware of who Sibiir were.
Cool.
I'd heard Ropes from 2019, which I'd kind of forgotten about, and then I saw someone must have been like going through Twitter looking for things about Sibiir, and someone liked a post of mine for like 2019 when I listened to the album. I was like, oh yeah, fuck, I remember listening to that now. But yeah, it's worth a listen. If you haven't checked it out, go and have a wee listen to that album after listening to this review, obviously. If you've never heard Sibiir before, they are a kind of mix of like Blackened hardcore, punk, little flourishes of kind of sludgy, kind of post-metal. There's a little bit of post-hardcore in there as well. Definitely like hints of like Converge, Oathbreaker, Burnt by the Sun, somewhere within that kind of realm. But it never really like sounds out and out like another band. You know, it's hard to say.
Yeah,
they
don't
sound
fully commit to one. Yeah,
absolutely. But I really enjoy bands that kind of take a real kind of like handful of genres and then, you know, just kind of blends them all together and pulls it off, you know, so seamlessly like they do. I think like at no point during this album's runtime does it feel like any of the genres this band are kind of bringing to the mix are just kind of like wedged in for the sake of it. They all feel just as important to the kind of overall sound as each other. You've got that kind of like visceral hardcore, kind of Blackened hardcore streak that adds so much vitriol and rage to the album, but then it's got a thickness that's brought to it from the sludge and kind of post-metal ideas. And then you've got like a topping of like a bleak melody, which comes from both the kind of Blackened parts and the more post-hardcore elements. And together, it's like a really, really good blend of everything kind of brought together in the album. And I think balance is something this band does really well. It's a very well thought out sound, even dynamically. This isn't an album that stays at kind of one level and remains there for the entire album. It gives you these sections of more delicate, clean guitars that's surrounded by a bit of a kind of haunting kind of atmosphere to it. You get a bit of that on Ingerdal, which kind of touches on like post rock in some of the lead work, or tracks like Watch from a House on Fire, where they use some more of those kind of post-hardcore kind of tones on the track. Texturally and tonally, it's the same. It's very varied. Some of it's really crusty and kind of grimy sounding. There's sections where you can feel that like Norwegian black metal chill kind of running through it. Then there are areas where they get really expansive, little flickers of kind of light cut through the darkness. And tempo-wise, again, plenty of variation, ranging from that kind of hardcore ferocity on the opener, which is also peppered with these slower, kind of sludgy post-metal sections to give it a bit of groove. Then they go like full-on black metal with the blasts and the tremolo riffs. So it's never an album that really gets stuck in gear, to be honest. It's always very diverse in all areas. And I think the delivery of this comes across probably even more proficient than on Ropes. And I love what they did on Ropes, but I feel like this is a bit more detailed. There are more levels to this album that the band have clearly thought about, and much more on this one. I think that might be down to the fact that it was maybe written before vocals were added, because musically it does, the music on its own is incredibly effective. There's a lot of this here that could work instrumentally. There's a lot of nuance, a lot of detail in the guitars. That even when there are no vocals, there's always something going on in the background of the tracks. But it's done well because it never feels like it's like overstuffed either. That balance of how much they've added never really oversteps or gets in the way of the vocals. It shows this band are still, getting better at songwriting, and I think this album was another step in the right direction in that department. They've taken 5 years to put this one together, and you can hear the work that's gone in. I think on Ropes, there was maybe areas where it felt like they were running out of ideas a little bit at times, and it became a touch repetitive. This one didn't kind of have that as much. You could hear the distinction between the tracks. I think they've used tempo and rhythm much more wisely on this release as well. I think vocally, it's really, really good. I think Jimmy's got a really intense kind of vocal delivery on the album, but he's got a tone that really works for all styles of the band's sound. He probably sits more within the kind of hardcore side of things, but he has a register that easily works within black metal without it sounding out of place. I think there's a lot of times where he mixes up that harsh tone with a little bit of a kind of blended melody, and it sounds great as well. I think my favourite example of that was on Wearing the Weight, which is a bit slower, a bit sludgier in style, and he uses this almost Joe Duplantis type approach on the chorus, where it's a bit more, epic sounding. It's probably the cleanest his vocals get on the album, to be honest, but it adds a bit more size to the Sibiir sound. And even though the vocals may have been added, later than usual, they never sound like an add-on. There's as much thought in the vocal composition than there is in the music. I think that the production also helps put across that weight that Sibiir have at times when they really delve into those more meaty post-metal type parts. I think Ruben's done a great job of keeping the live energy and the live kind of tone of the album, but with a production that also delivers these songs with plenty of impact. I think if I had any gripes with this one, I think it would be, it's maybe not an album that gives you huge surprises as it goes on. Like once you hit that halfway mark and you become accustomed to the sound and the mix of styles, it doesn't really veer away from that, much after that. So it's maybe one that it maybe won't leave your jaw on the floor from unexpected moments. So on like repeat listens, I maybe didn't get as much reward from it. The one exception to that was maybe The Plague, track 7, which does give you a nice section of some quite gothic tones. There's some cool synth work they use on that, which I like to kind of alter the mood of the track. I'd like to hear a bit more of that, if I'm honest. I think it would help, again, differentiate some of the tracks from each other. There's a couple of tracks maybe that I felt shared too much of a similar kind of blueprint, so they kind of got blended together a little bit. But that being said, I think the material on Undergang does feel like a more enhanced version of what was on Ropes. So I feel like they are moving in the right direction on this one. What about yourself? What did you think of this release from Sibiir?
So, first time listen to first time band for me. So I didn't know anything about Sibiir at all. I think from a Cliff Note perspective, I think you've ticked off basically what their sound is.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any gaps here where I'm like, well, I picked out the thing that kind of came away from, like, conceptually is the whole sound of the album, is at times I was like, you're so close to almost being Cult of Luna without being Cult of Luna, which is like is the high Cult of Luna are one of my favorite post metal bands on the planet.
Yeah.
And their sound is like a rougher, readier sound, which I kind of love. Like post metal, if you were ever going to throw an accusation at it as a genre, as it can be a bit sterile and a bit clinical, because they mix in so much of a kind of sludgy hardcore tone and those blackened elements. This one is like if you thought post metal was a polished surface, it's a kind of grimy surface. You know what I mean, there's underneath it, the material is still the same, but there's a like a film or something that sits over the top of this, just makes it kind of unpleasant to touch. Sibiir have like a really good grasp of structures on a song. Like what I found about them is like they'll find a riff and they never overplay that riff. And on top of that as well, like they never put two songs together that start off the same way, which is really good. Like once again, thinking about like post-hardcore, post-metal, if you were throwing accusations at those, tend to be that they either go very monosyllabic with their kind of tempo between tracks, or they'll utilize chords that exist in a similar kind of structure between tracks as well, and there isn't much shaking up, but you instantly get the feel that this is playing in a couple of different pools, like almost from the off. Divergence in Deceit starts off in its big sludgy post-metal glory, but Placid Waters, which is the second track, kicks off with blast beats and blackened riffs. So like instantly they're staking their claim that, you know, as we work through this, don't expect the tracks to be just continuations of the same thing. And that continues through. It's interesting, they noted about... Well, they mentioned... I'm going to note that they mentioned that this was predominantly written vocal-less, and then the vocals came in afterwards. Yeah. Which I actually think is a unique way of approaching it, but not necessarily maybe as uncommon as they think it is in the genre of music they're playing in. I don't think... I always think, like, when I think about bands like Tool, for example, like, I know for a fact that, like, from interviews with that band, the band write everything pretty much, and then they come and give it to Maynard, and then he does these vocal things, and then they maybe tweak it with his ideas and suggestions, but the track's written before it comes to him. Yeah. They're not all in a room together jamming, right? So it's almost like, here is a track, it's 9 minutes long, what would you do in it? And Maynard changes things around. So it's maybe not that uncommon an approach, but it sounds like because they were all in the same city, to them it feels like an uncommon approach. I actually think it's benefited them here. Like, if you listen to track 4, which is Engerdal, into the Flood, which is... Engerdal is instrumental. It's a beautiful track. Really, 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 really hauntingly beautiful. And then it kicks into Flood, which is a big, massive Cult of Luna post-metal track. The fact that there's no vocals over that, and then the vocals kicking in on the Flood, if you conceptually take that as one long song, which to me I do, when the vocals come in, they have such more emphasis and such more impact. Whereas a band that were maybe all in the room together, chatting and discussing things, the inclination might have been to do some vocals on Enkerdal, which I think would have kind of ruined that. Like yourself, The Plague to me is the single, the obvious single here, because it's the one that kind of sits out as a bit experimental but hugely conventional track. I actually think this album finishes a lot stronger than it starts, if I'm honest. From the Flood through to the Famine, I get like a grasp of, if that had just been like an EP, I would have loved this. my problem overall is that I think that the album, as much as I love those kind of, this is the Blackened element, this is the kind of post-hardcore element, I think the first two songs opening this one, Divergence and Deceit and Placid Water, kind of feel almost like the band is trying to find its sound on the album. They almost kind of sit very disparate as a 1-2 track, which I don't think is always the best approach to opening on an album. I think the best approach to opening an album tends to be you hit that sound, and then the next track either speeds it or slows it down. I think in this one, they hit a sound, and then the next track tries to almost undermine that, and then Ruinous tries to settle it, and then Engerdal into Flood kind of resets it, and then from Watch from a House on Fire to The Famine is a cohesive block of really well written music. So I don't think it starts off as strong as it finishes, but saying that, I love the production on it. I love the vocals on this. This guy's got a fucking tone. I mean, just as it has, like you see, it's more rooted in hardcore than it is post-metal. It utilises post-metal techniques with a hardcore attitude. And as a result, when you listen to it, whenever he reaches into that black metal register, it just fucking works, man. It just really, really works. And because the production, if I had to describe it, it's kind of grey. It has that kind of post-metal grey, huge lumber, and very much like the artwork is like whites and greys and blacks. There are moments where colour comes in, and I think you're right again, not that I just want to keep stroking you off here. On The Plague, they experiment with some synthetic sims, and it opens things up on the back half. There's absolutely no reason they couldn't have done that on the first half of the album, and I know what they're saying, they want to try and strip it back, bare bones, approach it that way. I think that is commendable. I think you want to make everything you do sound as close to live as possible. Once there's too much studio fuckery, what we're doing. In here though, and it sounds fucking wicked when they do it, so more of that. I would love to hear more of that. I'm not saying every single song needs that, but another 2 or 3 instances of it on the album I think would have made it just elevate. I think it would have given it a more connective tissue throughout the overall sound. Not that I want to keep talking about how great Cult of Luna are. My favourite Cult of Luna album doesn't always sit amongst everyone's favourites, weirdly, but it speaks more to my mindset, and it's Vertical. When I listen to Vertical, it's an album which is a concept album, but it utilises synthetic sounds as a link, not only in the song composition, but as a linking method to thematically join the songs up. And as a result, you can be a bit samey or go a bit different, but that core is in the background, which always keeps you consistently locked into, oh right, I'm listening to this sound and this vibe. Sibiir, I think at times maybe lose it a little bit. It's fucking great. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed this one. I mean, without knowing where they were in the world, and I'm usually wrong on these, I'd picked Norway, so I'm quite impressed with myself. And it's not because the front cover looks like from a distance a church being burned. That's just the way I read it. It's like a magic picture. So yeah, a lot that I liked. I think the start of the album is maybe a little bit sloppy on style, but I think by the time you get to track 4, which is kind of like almost like a resetting of the balance, and particularly through tracks 5 to 9, I think the sound on that is just a colossal block of awesome. So yeah, a mixed bag, but I enjoyed it nonetheless.
Okay. So scores for this new release from Sibiir. What are we scoring Undergang? I enjoyed a lot of this as well. As I said, I'd heard them before, so I had a kind of rough idea what to expect. And this definitely felt like there was areas where they were evolved in their kind of sound, and their songwriting is definitely sounding better on this release. I think there's a couple of areas where it kind of falls down. I've kind of felt like the second half of the album, although they seem to find their sound, I just wanted a little bit more kind of excitement in that second half. There's that one moment on The Plague where I feel like it does open up. I agree with you. I think they could use more of that earlier on in the album. Production sounds really good. Vocally, it's really good as well. So I'm interested to hear where they go next, because this one, there's definite elements here where I'm more impressed with what they've done. Overall, I'm going to go 3.5 on this one. What are you thinking yourself?
Hashtag twinsies 3.5
Oh.
is where I'm coming in. Weirdly, we have different perspectives here. I enjoy the back half more than I enjoy the front half. But weirdly, for the same reasons. It's bizarre. Yeah, I mean, they're on my radar. I know they've got like you say, they've got a lengthy back catalogue in terms of not necessarily many albums, but many years under their belt. And let's just hope it doesn't take 5 years to get another album out for them.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see it live as well. I love bands like this live. I think they just as a gig going experience, you're not crushed in a mosh pit, but instead you just kind of stand in awe of like a huge fucking sound. And I think Sibiir would be awesome live. So yeah, 3.5 for me.
Nice. Sibiir Undergang out on June 14th. Links below to the band, to the pre-order. Check it out, have a listen, see what you think. That is the review. Thanks for checking out. Much appreciated. We'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.